both my colleagues Zoe Lofgren as well as John Yarmuth, who have joined us this morning. Zoe will speak momentarily about the Amicus brief issue that we're facing this week, and John will speak on the lack of the Republican caucus to produce a budget. And just briefly, once again, we're here facing another week of the Republicans' failure to produce a budget. Not as easy as Mr. Ryan thought it would be when he was in the majority and ranking file member. Now as a speaker, I think he's come to a realization of just how dysfunctional his caucus is. And we see that over and over again because of their demand of cutting an additional $6 trillion in the budget. And let me just put that in very real terms to the American people, what that means. What that means is cutting further programs like Medicare and Medicaid, making even deeper cuts to the pensions of our veterans, and further cutting Pell Grants for anyone who is aspiring to go to college or is in college today trying to afford to make ends meet. These are the very same programs that hardworking Americans have come to rely upon to help move them up the economic ladder, and the Republicans continue to say no, stay right where you are, in fact, go backwards. In many respects, the inmates are running the asylum, quite frankly. And I know today is March the 15th. I would say to Mr. Ryan, beware the Ides of March, because we see the self-destructing nature of the Republican caucus once again in their inability to come together to formulate a budget and a vision for the American people. And once again, really focus on the fact the Republicans don't have the ability to create a vision for America. They have none. They've never had one, whether in the minority and now in the majority, continuing under Speaker Ryan's tutelage. They continue to say to the American people, we have no vision. In fact, all we see is a vision of reducing spending in the United States to the point that we will really torture and make the American people suffer for that. Democrats have a vision. We have a vision of understanding that it takes a lot to run this country. It also takes smart people to come together, to work on compromise, to develop a budget and a plan to move the country forward that will sustain our national security, both home and abroad, and in homeland security as well, that will provide for the government to operate, as well as make sure that the least amongst us have that safety net that is there to make sure that they don't fall further behind. It means making sure that Medicare and Medicaid have the resources they need to make sure that people who need the services they provide have those services, that the individuals who are on Social Security, like my mom, will know that Social Security will be there for themselves and for generations to come. That's not in the game plan of the Republican caucus right now. Quite frankly, it's about going backwards and not about going forward. Again, a lack of a vision for our country. We also have on the agenda this week a motion by the Speaker to file an amicus brief against the President of the United States on his use of executive order. I'm very proud of the fact that Zoe Lofgren has been leading the charge on this issue in the House of Representatives, along with Tim Ryan and many, including myself and Javier Becerra, Luis Gutierrez et al., to really send the message that Democrats do not join in the Republicans in their amicus brief, that we will file our own amicus brief. And with that, I call upon Zoe Lofgren for her comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Congress has failed to reform the immigration laws that every element of our society realizes is broken. And in the face of that, the President finally took some action to stabilize the situation. His actions followed the law, which was delegated to him repeatedly by the Congress, most recently in the creation of the Homeland Security Act, and provides a temporary relief for DREAM Act children who are brought here as babies and young people, the parents of American citizens. And as we know, Republican governors sued to stop this action that has its antecedents and precedents in the actions of President Reagan and President Ford back so many years ago. Democrats have filed an amicus brief. It's quite lengthy, and it outlines the legal and historical precedents for what the president did. 186 Democrats signed this amicus brief in the House and 39 senators. We read it, and in fact, one of my colleagues pointed out a typo on page 39. Instead, Speaker Ryan is suggesting to the House and his Republican colleagues, sight unseen, no text of an amicus, that they simply vote no against the president based on their own prejudice and their own partisanship. We think this is very disturbing. It is not without precedent, but it's been many decades since the House has been asked to intervene in such a matter. We hope that the Republicans will think better of this. They have every right to, on their own, as we have done, get volunteer lawyers, clear it through the Ethics Committee, as we did, and reach out to their members to file a brief. But to ask the House to go on record in this, what is now they have created as a partisan measure, would be wrong and not in accordance with House precedents.
Thank you, sir. And with that, we also have a member of the Budget Committee, Mr. John Yarmuth.
Well, thank you, Joe. As all of you know, we are supposedly embarked on a part of the budget process this week. This is the 8th year that I've served on the Budget Committee, and I will say there are already some things that are unprecedented about this year's process. The first is that for the first time in 40 years, Republican majority has refused to allow the administration to present its budget to the committee. Again, 40 years ago, we started that tradition. The director of OMB comes to the Hill and presents the president's budget. He was not invited, was not accorded that kind of respect. And the reason is very clear, that budgets are statements of values and priorities, and the Republican majority did not want to contrast their budget concept with that of the administration, because the budget concept that the Republicans will be putting forward is the same one that they have put forward for the last few years. And if you recall, this was what was called the Ryan budget. The Ryan budget was so politically poisonous that Governor Romney had to repudiate it during his 2012 presidential campaign. But that doesn't mean that they are through with the concept. They will put forth a budget that will slash education funding, Pell Grants, will cut SNAP funding, will cut funding for important medical research. Across the board, as Joe Crowley mentioned earlier, programs that are considered vital to vulnerable Americans will be slashed. And we will be returning, if the Freedom Caucus has its way, to sequestration level funding. We made a significant bipartisan accomplishment last fall in coming up with an agreement to expand discretionary funding by a small amount, but it was an important amount. And one of the things it did, for instance, was to add funding to the National Institutes of Health, which will help us sustain life-saving research. Under the Republican budget that we are likely to see tomorrow, all of that will disappear. Most importantly, this will be done without any consultation with any of the people who represent communities that are so dramatically impacted by any budget. So we ask the Republicans to be transparent. We ask the Republicans to allow a contrast with the priorities of the president, and we will, of course, be introducing our own budget, which will dramatically contrast with the priorities of the Republican Party, which, again, have been rejected by the American people. So it'll be an interesting process. It seems unlikely that Republicans can pass a budget this year in the House of Representatives, but we would be willing to work with them to pass one if it were reasonable and supported the priorities that most Americans share. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I quite frankly think we should stay here until we pass a budget. We've heard that before. So primarily from our Republican colleagues, we'll see now how they feel about that, that we're calling for that. So with that, we'll open up for questions if there are any.
Congressman Yarmuth mentioned that the deal on the budget, 2 years of spending cuts in the fall. You spoke about Speaker Ryan having more trouble than he would expect, but how much of this is fundamentally about them keeping their word?
Well, part of it is about, I know that there's been discussions between the Speaker, and I believe Mitch McConnell has said he's going to stick to the deal. You know, I think that's good so far for the American people, but in terms of the process itself, it shows the level of dysfunctionality that exists within the Republican majority conference here in the House of Representatives. They have a significant wing of their party that says that not only is that deal not good enough, we want to go even further and make further cuts. So I think it's important for the American people to understand that the so-called Freedom Caucus and the Tea Party element of the Republican Party, the far extreme elements of it that are becoming more commonplace in the House Republican Caucus today, are not satisfied with that deal. And they're the biggest impediment to, I think, Speaker Ryan being able to produce a budget. I think, as Mr. Yarmuth just said, if the Speaker comes forward, like just about every major deal that has been done over the past 5 years here in the House of Representatives, and wants to talk to Leader Pelosi and talk to the leadership of the Democratic Caucus and the leadership of the budget Democratic membership, come up with a reasonable budget that does not slash and burn and destroy the economy of our country and the livelihoods and the lives of people in this country, those who are at the lower rung, who are desperate to just keep their head above water. We'll talk to them about that and see if there's a way forward. But as of yet, I haven't seen any type of a peace offering from the other side. John, do you want to add to that?
No, I think Mr. Crowley put it correctly. This is, we did a deal. Now, granted, only 79 Republicans voted for that deal in the House. So I do understand that that's part of the problem, but they know that they can't count on the 160 or 70 Democrats who helped push that deal across the line last year. And I think on the Budget Committee, there are at least 6 or 7 members of the Freedom Caucus, which means if they don't support it, they can't even pass it in the Budget Committee. So they aren't going to get any help for us, not with the type of budget that they want to put forward.
Speaker Ryan, he made his career, whether you like it or hate the Ryan budget, and this isn't failing the public defense authorization bill. I mean, what does it say that he can't, the man known as the Republican lawmaker, can't say what he's supposed to do?
Well, again, I think this is a sign of the problems inherent in the Republican Party right now, and when you have people who really don't believe in government, who want to emasculate government at every possible turn, who don't want to fund the FDA to a level at which we can actually protect the food and drug supply of the American people, who don't want to fund EPA so we can avoid Flint, Michigans and other environmental disasters that we've had in this country. Those are the types of things that they basically become self-fulfilling prophecies. They want to starve the beast so that the beast looks like it cannot provide the kind of services that the American people want. We want a government that can do what the American people want us to do for them.
Deferred action agreement, do you expect Democrats to be unanimous in opposition to that? And also, have you reached out to any Republicans who might be a little bit more sympathetic to see ranking members vote against it as well?
Almost all of the Democrats signed the amicus brief. A handful, have a policy of not signing briefs, and we respect that. But the overwhelming majority of Democrats signed the brief. We know from their rhetoric that the Republicans would not. I just think that to go back, it's been decades since anything like this has happened. It's extraordinary for the Speaker to try and put the House on record when in fact we're completely divided. And I guess the other thing that bothers me is for a group that said that you should read the bill, that you should know what you're voting on, that the resolution just says we're against it. They don't know why. They haven't read the law. They haven't read the facts of the precedents. We have. And I think if they were to read our brief, which they will, we're going to make it available in advance of our motion to recommit. They'll see that they're wrong on the law, they're wrong on the precedents, and really, they're wrong for the future of our country. This idea that you would go out and seek out and grab out of their homes 15 and 16-year-old kids who've lived here since they were infants, that's not good for the American culture. It's not good. The kind of police state that would take is not what America wants or needs.
I would just add that is also the message of their apparent standard bearer. Donald Trump has been using this type of rhetoric since the get-go. whether it's building a wall or it's sending people back to where they came from, and that type of verbiage and demagoguery. That what you're really having happen right now is maybe the Republican caucus finally catching up to their standard bearer, and maybe in a desperate attempt to show some unity. I hope that's not the case, but apparently this amicus brief, what we haven't been able to read and don't really fully understand what is in it yet, but we know it is against the actions that our president has taken that many, if not all, of the Democratic members of our caucus have been supportive of, leads one to believe that they are simply getting in line with the Trumpites of the world and their leader. Anyway.
On immigration, this bill yesterday from Chairman Goodlatte and Earl Labrador, it would cap the number of refugees. It's on our understanding that that's going to move fairly quickly through the committee. Assuming that comes to the floor, are there concerns that could pass the Senate and reach the president's desk? I assume you were not part of writing that bill, but are you concerned with that?
Well, not only were we not a part of writing it, but they refused to share it with us until just a day or two ago, and it's to be marked up on Wednesday. Looking at the bill, it basically would prevent implementation of the refugee program, and we will have a markup I believe on Wednesday, that goes through in great detail the problems. But, American refugee policy was really set when a boatload of refugees, Jewish refugees from Nazi Germany, were off Miami and were sent back. And many of the individuals there ended up dying in concentration camps in Nazi Germany. And at that time, the United States confronted what it had done and decided that we're going to be part of an international effort to make sure that people who are facing death are going to be given safe refuge. We have the Statue of Liberty with a light that is a beacon of hope. The U.S. is a beacon of hope for the world. And to turn that light out, which is what this bill would do, runs counter to what our country is about.
I just got word that Donald Trump just bought Liberty Island. Any other questions? With that, I want to thank you all and wish everyone a very happy St. Patrick's Day.